Thank you for joining me. In our last video, we explored why academia often leans heavily toward evolution and spoke briefly about the beliefs among Western populations. Now, a frequent comment on many creation focused discussions is that we just don't understand evolution or read a science book. I'm very familiar with all these comments as I used to make them myself. It's a common assumption that anyone who believes in creation must be backwards or dismissive of scientific evidence, as though creationists fail to grasp the essence of evolutionary theory. This comment from my last video really sums up the broader attitude. We teach evolution instead of creationism, just like we teach chemistry instead of alchemy, and astronomy instead of astrology, and medicine instead of witchcraft. In other words, some people think creation science is like an outdated belief system that modern science has replaced. But that's not the case. And in today's video, we are going to unpack that. Let's start with the dual misunderstanding. On one hand, many evolutionists assume creationists are simply uninformed or clinging to old ideas. They compare creation science to something like alchemy, implying it's been debunked. But in reality, we're looking at the same scientific data: genetics, fossils, natural laws, when we're seeing it through the perspective that it points to design. We're not ignoring the science. We're just interpreting patterns we see as evidence of an intelligent creator. On the other hand, creationists sometimes feel that evolutionists don't realize that they are operating from their own set of philosophical assumptions. Evolution relies on naturalism, the idea that everything can be explained by natural processes alone. Creationists are simply saying that maybe that's not the whole story. Evolutionists are often operating on the assumption that the experts are right. But what if they are wholly wrong? Creationists have identified key areas in varying scientific fields where the accepted science has huge holes. One major hole is that when it comes to evolutionary theory, the application of the scientific method often goes out the window. True science, what we call operational science, deals with repeatable, testable, observable processes in the present. You can study gravity, electricity, chemistry, or biology in real time. But evolution, as an explanation for origins, isn't testable that way. You simply cannot recreate millions of years of supposed change in a lab. You can't directly observe one kind of animal turning into another, and not one occurrence of this has ever been recorded in all of human history. So when someone says evolution is science and creation is religion, they're misunderstanding what science really is. Both views are interpretations of the same evidence, just starting from different worldviews. In essence, they are two distinct scientific theories comprising of the same data. Now, let's dive into natural selection, a key indicator of evolution according to most modern experts, and one of the biggest points where our perspectives differ. Evolutionary theory presents natural selection as a creative engine. Over immense time, random mutations arise, and natural selection builds new species and complex structures from those changes. From a creation science viewpoint, we see something very different. We see natural selection as a sorting and filtering and refining process that operates within the genetic potentiality already built into each kind. Think of it like programming a video game. A skilled coder doesn't rewrite every line of code from scratch when creating a new level. He reuses reliable code snippets, adjusting them for new environments. The program adapts, but the base code remains the same. In that same way, creatures adapt within the boundaries of the DNA code they already possess. Natural selection doesn't write new code, it simply filters or limits the options that were already there. We can observe this all around us. Wolves, coyotes, and domestic dogs, for example. They are all part of the same created kind, the canid family. Through selection and isolation, certain traits become more prominent in each population. Wolves have thicker coats for cold climates, while desert foxes have larger ears to dissipate heat. Yet no new genetic information has appeared. Each is expressing variations already present in the ancestral gene pool. We see the same principle in Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands. Their beak size is changed depending on available food sources. During droughts, birds with larger, tougher beaks survive. When smaller seeds return, the smaller beaked birds thrive again. The populations shift, but the finches remain finches. That's natural selection in action. Microevolution, not macroevolution. And that brings us to a crucial distinction that is often ignored in the textbooks. Microevolution refers to small, observable changes within a species or kind, shifts in gene frequency, color, or size that occur over generations. Macroevolution, on the other hand, claims that countless micro changes actually produce entirely new kinds of creatures, a leap that has never been directly observed. When critics blur that line, they imply that because we can watch bacteria adapt to antibiotics, therefore dinosaurs turned into birds. But that leap crosses from observational into assumption. There's another mechanism worth mentioning: hybridization. This happens when two varieties of the same kind interbreed, sometimes producing entirely new combinations of traits. A familiar sterile example is the mule, the offspring of a horse and a donkey, both within the equine kind, but genetically distant enough that their hybrid offspring can't reproduce. Yet, among animals more closely related, like different species of duck, cattle, or even big cats, hybrids can remain fertile, preserving that mixed genetic diversity for future generations. This ability for rapid genetic shuffling may have played a huge role immediately after the flood, when animals dispersed into new environments. As they bred and adapted into distinct climates, combinations of traits already programmed into their DNA could surface quickly, producing remarkable diversity within just a few generations. From the creation perspective, that's exactly what we'd expect: rapid variation within fixed boundaries rather than limitless transformation. So when we look at these examples, wolves, finches, hybrid cats, or post flood diversification, we're observing the full extent of natural selection's creative power. It fine tunes, it doesn't invent. It can reshape populations, but it cannot create entirely new genetic information or new biological kinds. In short, the evidence for adaptation and variation is undeniable, but the conclusion that these processes can build brand new forms of life is a philosophical assumption, not an experimental observation. True science, what we can test and repeat, shows us microevolution, not macroevolution. The creative power lies not in random mutation, but in the design of the genetic system so rich and flexible that it allows life to thrive in nearly any environment on Earth. Here's another key point. We believe that non believers often misunderstand what creation science actually is. They assume that because we question evolutionary theory, we must be rejecting science itself. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Creationists fully embrace science, the observation, measurement, and discovery of how the world works. What we reject is the physical limitation that says only natural, unguided explanations can be considered. In other words, we don't deny science, we deny scientific censorship. The idea that evidence pointing to design must be ignored simply because design implies a designer. We've already talked about DNA and its role as the most complex information system known to man. But the fingerprints of design don't stop at the cellular level. They extend into the very structure of mathematics and physics. Consider the Fibonacci sequence, a simple pattern of numbers where each value is the sum of the two before it. This sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on, show up everywhere in nature. In the spirals of seashells, the arrangement of sunflower seeds, pine cones, hurricanes, and even galaxies. It's a natural mathematical language woven into everything from the smallest organism to the vast structure of the cosmos. Or take laws of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, the speed of light, or the nuclear forces that hold atoms together. Each has a precise value. Change any one of those constants by even a fraction, and the universe collapses. The harmony between these forces isn't random, it's tuned for stability and life. If you are familiar with the World of Warcraft, this analogy will bring it home. For those who played the original game, you might remember how the developers were constantly patching the code to fix bugs and maintain balance. Everything worked beautifully until the Lich King, when massive raid dungeons began breaking apart. Bosses glitched through floors, spells didn't trigger, and entire systems crashed because even minor lines of code conflicted with others. That's the point. When a complex system, whether it's a video game, an ecosystem, or the laws of physics, runs smoothly, it's because there's intentional design and consistent rules holding it together. Removing the guided logic or alter a few constants, and the entire system unravels. The universe operates like a flawless piece of software precisely because it was written by an intelligent mind, not assembled by accident. So when we look at the patterns like Fibonacci sequence, the mathematical precision of planetary motion, or the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, we don't see coincidence. We see engineering. We see purpose. We see an author whose signature is embedded in the code of creation itself. That's what we think is most often misunderstood. Creationists aren't afraid of science. We are inspired by it. Every new discovery, from quantum mechanics to fractal geometry, doesn't diminish our belief, it reinforces it. Because the deeper we dig, the clearer it becomes. This world isn't the product of chaos. It is the product of code, law, and logic, the hallmarks of an intelligent creator. As we wrap this up, let's take a step back and look at the big picture. We've explored natural selection and genetics, how life adapts within boundaries of existing information. We've seen how hybridization and microevolution reveal flexibility, not limitless transformation. We've looked at the repeating patterns in nature, the Fibonacci sequence, mathematical constants, and the fine-tuned balance of physical laws, and even compared them to the fragile stability of massive coded systems like World of Warcraft. All of these examples point to the same truth. Order requires intelligence. In the game world, when one small line of code breaks, entire raids collapse. Just like in the Burning Crusade and Cataclysm, where bosses glitched through floors and mechanics fell apart because one change rippled through the entire system. If human design system that complex demands constant maintenance, imagine what would happen if the finely tuned laws of gravity or electromagnetism shifted by even a fraction. Life, chemistry, even atoms themselves would cease to function. That's not chaos producing order. That's order sustained by precision. It's the same principle across every field of study: genetics, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and even computer science, all revealing interlocking systems that follow consistent, universal rules. Without those rules, nothing works. Creation science doesn't reject science, it celebrates it. It says, look closer. Every law, every code, every predictable equation points to structure, reason, and design. The more we uncover, the more we see that this universe behaves not like a cosmic accident, but like an engineered masterpiece, balanced, ordered, and purposeful. And yes, belief in a creator requires faith, but so does belief in an unguided evolution. Faith that randomness can somehow write code, that chaos can sustain order, and that information can arise without intelligence. The difference is where that faith begins. One starts with chance, and the other starts with purpose. So whether we are talking about DNA, the golden ratio, or the invisible constants that keep stars burning and atoms stable, one truth echoes through them all. Creation isn't fragile because it's lucky. It's stable because it's design. Thank you again for joining me. Join me next time and we will get even more curious.